Have you ever been to therapy at all?
No. Why you think I should be? You think I should be
Well,
there?
clear I mean, that goes without saying, but
I don't you know what I don't like about it is I don't like the idea of going back into, my past or my history and then being told by somebody else how I should feel about it, and not that I think that that's what they're going to do, but my experiences with just generally having conversations with, people who are very well enmeshed in a Western cultural, like, meaning net, right? Like, and people who understand relationships as dysfunctional or healthy depending on our in this place and time conception of what is healthy. I feel like I have trouble translating my experiences to them because my parents come from a very different kind of culture. They had very different assumptions about the world, about their position as parents, and I held on to all those beliefs and retained some of them. Some of that changed, but not all of it did, and not all of it translates. Like, I think about the fact that, like, my parents, if I had honestly stated what my parents, like, objectively just did as parents, I think a school counselor would have, like, called Child Protective Services. You
mm,
know what I mean? Because they were super authoritative. They definitely believed in, physical punishment if that's what they thought punishment was. And I, up until I was quite old, like, I would say teenager, I'd hit like post puberty. I was becoming a woman. Up until that time, I got spanked, like, a
mhm.
lot, even. Like, my mom was severe about that kind of thing. And I think it could easily seem like, on the outside, if you looked at the fact that that happened and that was their primary mode of, like, communicating their dissatisfaction with me, the fact that they weren't really involved in my emotional life at all, like, they didn't give a
Yeah.
she looks happy, that's fine. They're not
Mhm.
gonna, they didn't necessarily ask me how my day went. Because they're very busy. They're, working all the time.
Right.
There was a context to all of it. And I think on paper, that would have just seemed like an abusive environment. And I'm guarded about that, the fact that things seem a certain way depending on your cultural context. And I don't want, yeah, I just don't, it just feels
See, this
gross to me to let
no,
anyone
I
in
that
and
that makes sense. I mean, my impression is that, like, even a school guidance counselor should be culturally competent enough to be able to keep that context in mind. Maybe that's changed. I mean, when I was in
mm,
school, there were certainly immigrant families in there that you knew those kids were having a very different kind of experience than a lot of the white kids. And I can't imagine the guidance counselors, like, I can't imagine anybody calling Child Protective Services.
uh,
I mean,
maybe
maybe that's changed.
maybe
Maybe,
now,
yeah, no,
yeah.
maybe that's
Um,
changed. Yeah.
but I mean, I think they do try to be cultural, so, but there's difficulties that presents as well, because when I was working with ex-Muslims, like, kids who had left the religion, and some of them were actually experiencing pretty severe abuse at the
Yeah.
hands of their family. Not in a way that, even in that context, in every context, is abuse, but the therapists would kind of look the other way because they were like, "Oh,
Right.
but we don't understand what's happening in that culture, and I'm supposed to be sensitive to it." So they didn't take it as seriously, and I understand, right? Like, but that's a really difficult line to walk, and it seems as if you can't win no matter what you do. So I'm very wary of a kind of practice that requires, like, such a deep, individualistic like level of knowledge about a person. And their only way really of having it is through self-report. And that's obviously,
Mhm.
like, very, very um that's a problematic way of arriving at a conclusion. Like, so that is what the counselor would have had to do in my case, like, because the facts of the matter were that my parents were, quote unquote, abusive. But in
Mhm.
reality, I would have said I love my parents.
Mhm.
um but then, should they listen to what I say, given that self-report is also pretty unreliable? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, it's not a
No, it's hard. I
this is
mean,
what I meant by.
right. And now it's sort of, I mean, but yeah, I mean, but this is the sort of logic that keeps social justice activists from getting upset about female circumcision because we can't judge
Mhm.
their culture.
Yeah,
Right. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it goes both ways.